Who will win the NFC West, or as many people are calling it, the best division in the NFL this year? The best division in football. Before I give you my explanation for who will win the NFC West, make sure that you do Gronk, spike that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more BLV NFL videos just like this, and get in the comments and let me know who you believe will win the NFC West in 2021. So all four teams in the NFC West can win this division this year. I really do believe there's four teams. That's why they call it the best division in football, because really the Cardinals, the Seahawks, the 49ers, or the Rams could win this division this season. That's what makes it challenging. That's what makes it fun. That's what makes it unpredictable. The divisional matchups within the NFC West might actually be the determining factor for who wins this division. It probably will be the determining factor for who wins this division, who makes the wild card, who misses the playoffs entirely. Let's go through each of the four teams. Let's start it off with the team that's least likely to win the division. That is the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals still have an argument to win this division, but I feel like the Cardinals have the most fire and ice type of team. They have the big upside, but also they have probably the lowest of floors of all of these teams in this division. Kyler Murray is such an X factor for this team. He's such a dynamic playmaker. He makes things happen. But what I really want to see Kyler Murray do in order to take this team to the next level is develop as an intermediate passer. Develop as a pocket passer. Develop as a consistent force through the air. Because last year we really truly saw what he could do running the ball, creating. That's not to say that Kyler Murray is inaccurate. That's not to say that Kyler Murray can't throw past the ball. He certainly can, but he's not quite on the elite level of the elite quarterbacks when it comes to consistently making plays through the air, the way that a Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, those guys are better passing the ball at a consistent rate. For him to get in that category, he's going to need to prove it this year. But he does create just absolute nightmares for defensive coordinators due to his elusiveness, due to his quickness with his feet, and due to his ability to run, which opens up the entire offense. Speaking of the entire offense in the run game, Chase Edmonds should certainly feature in this backfield. We'll see a little bit of sprinkle of James Conner here and there, but I really believe this is Chase Edmonds' season to break out. Hudson at center, I think, creates just big holes up the gut for this team to run, because when you look at it and when you think about it with the spread system and the air raid and being with a lot of receivers on the field spreading teams out, Hudson's ability to open up the middle of the field and Kyler holding that edge is really going to create gashes and big holes for Chase Edmonds and these runners to run behind and create extra yards, which I think is going to make their offense overall a better offense. Even though they might change nothing at all with this offense and none of the plays, they'll just be better because I think the offensive line is slightly better, and I think the experience of this system with these players within it is going to be better, especially when it comes to Kyler Murray. DeAndre Hopkins, of course, is one of the game's best receivers in football. I do want to see them be more creative with D-Hop when it comes to lining him up in different spots, because the majority of the time he just lines up in the same darn spot, and I need to see more creativity from Cliff in that regard. Move him in the slot, move him to the right, move him to the left, have him all over, and have him be a mismatch where he is most advantageous. The other receivers, I think Rondale Moore could really be the difference maker from last year to this year when it comes to a complement, when it comes to getting a guy the ball in his hands and making plays. You still have Christian Kirk, who's solid, and then you also brought in AJ Green. How much can you get from AJ Green? Can you get a nice 2 perimeter receiver there from AJ Green? Possibly. I kind of see him more as like a jump ball, red zone type of guy, an occasional possession receiver, but I don't see the upside currently with AJ Green. Mostly I see a decent offense. I don't see an elite offense. I don't see a great offense. I'm not in love with the play calling. I'm not in love with the scheme, but the creative playmaking quarterback in Kyler Murray, along with a better rushing attack, along with possibly better, more diverse playmakers, and still having D-Hop in the fold makes them a really good offense capable of scoring on pretty much anyone and having big spot games throughout the season. Defensively might be the determining factor for the Cardinals, especially when it comes to their secondary. I think the biggest question on their team is their secondary. I was a little nervous last year about their O-line, and their O-line still wasn't great, but I think, like I said, they've improved that a little bit. So I'm more concerned about the overall secondary and their coverage unit and their ability to consistently cover. The Cardinals play a lot of man-to-man coverage, surprisingly, even though most of the time they have had zone corners in this scheme. And that's what I feel like has taken away from their secondary, but I just don't see the upper echelon talent at this corner position or even the safety position outside of Budda Baker that you truly need to have to play this kind of scheme. They're aggressive. I think the front seven is pretty good, especially adding J.J. Watt to the fold. Chandler Jones, I don't know what he's going to be coming off of a significant injury. I think Zaven Collins could be an impact player right away. Hicks, Simmons should take a development and a step forward. I think their front seven's one of the better units, probably in the top 10 in the league. I just don't know what to expect from the corners, because if you're getting torched all day, if you're getting burned all day, if the receivers on the outside are getting open quickly, it doesn't really matter how good your front seven is if teams can get the ball out fast. So I think that's the determining factor. If they can find a way to marry the coverage to the front and to the pass rush, then I think we've got something, and then I think we have a team that can flirt with the NFC West title, but I don't necessarily know if they have that, along with just a coaching staff overall, mostly offensively, that is a little bit puzzling. I'm not sure about Cliff Kingsbury, to be honest. I think he is the worst head coach in this division, and that is probably why I have the least amount of confidence in Arizona actually winning this division, and maybe even making the playoffs, just because Cliff Kingsbury is so much of a lower tier than a guy like Shanahan, McVay, or Pete Carroll. So I see the upside with the Cardinals. I could see why somebody picks the Cardinals. I'm just not willing to bet on them in 2021. My third team is the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks could certainly win the NFC West. We've seen it before. We've been there before. It could happen, right? But I don't know if it will happen. I think the Seahawks have more holes roster-wise than anyone in this division. They have the most holes, the most question marks of the Cardinals, the Rams, or the Niners, period. The Cardinals are a better roster than Seattle. I think the Seattle Seahawks have more legacy, right? More longevity. They've proven it year after year. Russell Wilson is, to me, a better quarterback than Kyler Murray. I think Seattle has two really good receivers, not just one. They have a good running back. They have a solid offensive line that's gotten better throughout the offseason. And I do think their offensive coordinator and Shane Waldron will give them more consistency this year than what we've seen from them in the past with Schottenheimer. I just believe that Russell Wilson will not be this 8-week spark player where he's the MVP for the first 8 weeks and then he falls off. I think we're going to see more straight line consistency from Russell Wilson. Maybe he doesn't have the amazing beginning to the year that he usually typically does, but I just think having a straight across just great year overall from Russ is to be expected this year, more so than what we saw last year. DK is an absolute animal. If he were to be the best receiver in football next year, I wouldn't be surprised. Tyler Lockett's an excellent player. I think they added Gerald Everett and Eskridge, which adds them 2 dimensions to the offense. One as a short intermediate, ball in the hands playmaker, and also a speedy young receiver who can be a nice number 3 complement that complements Russell Wilson's ability to throw the deep ball. Chris Carson, if he can remain healthy, that would certainly help. But this offense will probably likely be top 10 in points, and if they let Russ cook more than usual, it could be even better than that. I truly do believe that. Now, the defense is where I'm a little bit not so excited for this team. I just don't see the upside with this defense. I think at best, they're a top 15 unit. At best. I think at worst, they're one of the worst in the league. I think it truly depends on what they get out of their defensive line. You lost KJ Wright. I don't see him coming back at the linebacker spot. So that makes you a little bit more thin at that position that you've typically had a lot of depth. The D-line, though, you could see it get better. Like, Kerry Hyder was maybe a good signing for you. Carlos Dunlap in a trade contributed and was good for you, and you got a lot better once you got him. Benson Mayowa, these guys like Ford, they're solid players, don't get me wrong. Like, they're solid contributors on an NFL team, but you don't have a Joey Bosa. You don't have a Nick Bosa, a Myles Garrett, a TJ Watt. You don't have a Chris Jones. You don't have an Aaron Donald. You don't have these guys that just go out there and dominate on the D-line. And in this scheme, you kind of need that. Like, I think the biggest thing that Seahawks fans get wrong is they think of the Legion of Boom and think of their secondary, when in fact their success was started because of their pass rush. I think Michael Bennett was the most underrated player in football at one time, and Cliff Averill was excellent. That D-line allowed the secondary to play the way they played, and that scheme really is at its best when you have a front four that gets to the quarterback, because it allows the back end to play fast and react, right? And I don't see the corners either. So if your pass rush isn't excellent, you at least need a good back end. And with Adams and Diggs, I think you have a good duo there. Adams is just a playmaker all over, and Bobby Wagner is still good. The cornerbacks, I just don't see them as good players, like Witherspoon and Flowers. I'm not excited about that on the perimeter. DJ Reed's a decent young player, but like, I don't love this defense. I think at best they're solid. They're decent. They're passable. At worst, they're bad like they were at the beginning of last year. So mixing all of that into the pot, along with the Pete Carroll, who seems to be aging in this league in terms of decision making, in terms of forward progress and forward thinking, and each and every year seems to be out game planned by his opposition. It feels like Pete Carroll is losing his touch in terms of the NFL. And that's why I'm not so confident Seattle can win this division. I feel like they're pretty safe to have a winning record, but I think their ceiling is fairly low unless Russell Wilson goes nuclear this year, which is possible, but I don't know if it's really probable. The final two teams, the San Francisco 49ers and the LA Rams, I feel have the two best chances, the two best opportunities to win this division, and this is the way that I see it. Starting with the LA Rams, I feel like the Rams are being somewhat overrated, but also somewhat underrated. They're like a weird team. I don't really know how to put it. In one way, I feel like they're underrated because people are talking about them like, oh, they won't have the best defense this year, so they won't be that good and they'll miss the playoffs, or they won't be this contender. Well, keep in mind that they were a bottom 20 team in terms of yards per drive and points per drive. They were 25th in points per drive last year, and they still were a winning team, went to the playoffs, won a playoff game, and went to the divisional round. That won't happen with Matthew Stafford. Like, there's no chance that will happen. At worst with Matthew Stafford, they are a top 15 offense. That's at worst. At best, they're top 3 in the NFL, right? Like, that's how good they could be. They can run the ball with this scheme effectively. We've seen them just plug in random off-the-street running backs like CJ Anderson and have success. I think Henderson and Michelle are fully capable of replicating this rushing attack from a year ago, which was fairly good and the only real reason they actually moved the ball, because Jared Goff was incompetent last year when he wasn't turning the ball over or really just being awful versus pressure, or just, I don't know, seemingly not leading this team to success. It was just run city for them. It was outside zone, and they were gashing defenses predictably running the ball. So now that you have a quarterback that can actually have a legitimate drop back game on top of having a play action game with McVay and the creativity of actually being able to stress all areas of the field with Matthew Stafford's dynamic arm talent, you now have an offense that's completely unstoppable in some regard, because you have to contain the outside zone. You have to contain Matthew Stafford's deep ball. So then that opens up everything else underneath, and you have 2 to 3 incredible route runners underneath, with Van Jefferson slept on, first of all. But then you have Cooper Kupp and you have Robert Woods, who are just going to always be open. Then you throw in the just whole Robert Woods speed sweep stuff and Tutu Atwell as a weapon, and like, this is just so much that a defense has to defend vertically, horizontally, and all over the place, that they're going to be top 10, if not top 5, if not top 3. And I really am a Matthew Stafford guy. I really am a believer. And I feel like they've never been able to have a consistent passing game. Like, forget the play action, right? Just passing the ball, dropping back, getting the ball in the shotgun, and throwing the ball. With Jared Goff, that was very inconsistent and very, very, at times, incompetent. So I feel like with Stafford, you can add layers that you didn't possess before. The defense now is not as good. I get that. It's not as good. I won't expect it to be good. But even if they had the same players, I would still expect it to be worse than it was last year, because as simple as it gets, defense regresses. It doesn't stay the same. It often gets worse almost every single time a defense finishes first. They don't finish first the year after. So I still think they're top 10 though. Really, when you look at the losses, right? They only lost with one super significant player, and that was John Johnson. Troy Hill's a nice player, but he's not a great difference-making player. Let's be honest with ourselves right now. The other guys, like Brockers, is older. He's definitely replaceable as a run-defending D lineman. Like, you can find those guys. They were able to keep Floyd, who is arguably their second most important piece in their front seven, right? And I think they have underrated players along with those guys like Sebastian Joseph Day. Of course, they have Aaron Donald, but like Robinson and some of their linebackers, I feel, are a bit underrated. So the Rams might surprise people because they still might be able to get really good defense and have a really good offense. I'm not counting on them having a really good defense, though, because I believe in Brandon Staley, and that loss is big. But Raheem Morris, I may remind you, he was good with Atlanta last year with a really bad, really lacking talent defense. So I think he could still get good out of this defense, even with the holes that they now possess. So I still see a top 10 unit. So when you combine two top 10 units on either side of the ball, it should be one of the most balanced teams in football. The question is it good enough to win the NFC West? Because on the other hand, you have Kyle Shanahan's San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers, we've seen in 2019, they were the best team in the NFC, and it wasn't even that close, to be honest with you. Like, they blew out the Packers in the NFC Championship game. And they probably should have beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl if Jimmy Garoppolo makes one or two more throws, or they just don't let them come back generally. But they were a very good team and the best in the NFC that year. Last year, they dealt with a wicked bad luck season. Like, really, really bad injuries to some of their best players. Their quarterback position was in shambles. Nick Mullins was awful. And that's the way it went. But this year, they have one of the most talented rosters in football. I think their offensive line is the most slept on in the league. Trent Williams to Tomlinson to Mack to McGlinchey. This is a good offensive line. They've got an excellent running game with the scheme that Kyle possesses on top of the talent of Raheem Mostert and Trey Sermon. They're going to get real big contribution from that two-headed monster. George Kittle's back, healthy and dominant. Brandon Ayuk could be a big second-year jump player. Debo is an absolute force and unique player at this position. Their offense could be top 10, even maybe top 5. Jimmy, I think, is good enough to get them double-digit wins. But then you throw on top Trey Lance's ability to maybe throw in, even if he doesn't start, like short yardage running, a little bit of some creative quarterback scheme running on top of like all the jet sweep motion. Kyle's just so unique and so talented as a play caller. He's going to find a way to move the ball no matter what. And I really feel like this offense is going to be better than when it was. I really feel like this offense is going to be better than what it was in 2019. I really do. They have better perimeter players and they have just overall more talent. And I think maybe even a better O-line. The Niners are going to be good on offense, maybe not as good as the Rams, but it's pretty close, right? And the Niners have had the advantage over the Rams in terms of head-to-head matchups in recent history. The defense could be just as good as the Rams, if not better, right? Their D-line is really good across the board. I think Eric Armstead will be rejuvenated with Nick Bosa coming back as their elite pass rusher. And D Ford, stop sleeping on this guy. He's a really good pass rusher when he plays. They've got plenty of depth across the D-line, across really all positions on their team, which I think is where they have the edge over the Rams. Jason Verrett's a good corner. I think Jimmy Ward's a good safety. Fred Warner's the best linebacker in football. They've got a solid scheme that may actually be better now with DeMeco Ryans at the helm of the DC spot. I think the Niners have a real good argument to win this division because now, even if Jimmy gets hurt, they got Trey Lance. If Trey Lance gets hurt, they got Jimmy. They've got more depth than the Rams at basically all positions outside of wide receiver. Really, when you think about it, like offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, even safety and corner is pretty close. Like the Rams have more elite talents, but I think the Niners have more depth. And then you look on top of that, the Rams have to face a real tough schedule where it's a second place schedule. The Niners have to face a bottom schedule. And in a division where it's this tight, this competitive, this close, the Niners, according to PFF, have the easiest schedule in the NFL entering this year. That might be, and I think that is the difference for who will win this division. I think it's going to be the Niners. I just have so much faith in their talent, their roster, and even if the Rams have a better quarterback, I think the 49ers' talent, their coaching, and then you throw on top their schedule, it makes them, to me, the favorite to win this division because I do worry about the Rams' depth. I do worry about the lack of a defense at the elite level they were last year. Not saying the Rams will be worse than last year. I think they'll be better. I think they'll be just as good. But I think there's two elite teams in this division. Two of the top three teams in the AFC arguably reside in this division, at least the top four. If you say Tampa, maybe Green Bay throws in that mix, and then you got San Francisco and the Rams. That's the top four. So either way you could go here, in my opinion, but I feel the Niners' depth and roster talent is the reason they win this division, on top of them having the edge over the Rams in recent years. So that's why I have the Niners winning the NFC West in 2021. Let me know if I'm right. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comment section below. It's Mitch. Thanks for watching. Peace.